Final Stop Brasil, Chapter 36, 2001. New career, new start. Saidu's photo in the frame disappeared, and thanks to Max, even the cell phone he had given me. Out of boredom, Max had chewed the cable of the charger. Since I found no replacement station, I found myself compelled to buy a new phone and dispose of this one. Since beginning of this year, the euro was officially introduced in Germany, and the people were horrified. The euro possessed the value of about 2 Deutschmarks, but in the shops it was purely and simply replaced in prices 1-to-1, so that all prices were elevated by 100%. In other European countries, similar phenomena had caused up raises, but not in Germany. No one opened their mouths. Typically, the Germans once again let out their frustrations on minorities. Result of this new crisis was extremely buckling economic growth and rising unemployment, which was pushed by the opening of Eastern European borders even more. Many people lost their jobs since mid-sized companies migrated to Poland, the Czech Republic, or Bulgaria. Namely, there they spared the horrendous German companies' sales, profits, wages, and the devil knows what else taxes. In Eastern Europe, production was much cheaper, only due to lower wages, and by eliminating the higher labor costs. Without much knowledge of politics, I sensed evil with Germany. It would go down the drain because the chieftains of the government, in their arrogant manner, didn't recognize that the rigorous reform was necessary in order to adapt the general changing in Europe. If this wasn't going to happen, it would be over soon with the quality seal made in Germany, and the other European countries would overtake Germany in a breeze. Germany, once known as the welfare state, had been surpassed already long gone by neighboring countries concerning the social and health care. In all the countries was supplied free medical care, while in Germany the post-war statutory health insurance still diligently took off the gross pay, and on top of all elevated the medical insurance co-payments for dental treatments or hospital costs, not to mention the ailing pension system, close to collapsing. I was getting more and more queasy in this country, but whenever I tried to talk about it with someone, I just met deaf ears. Tom was getting annoyed. Since years you are complaining about the state and talking about emigration. Why don't you stop talking but do it? Ha! Tom was the right one to tell me this, who himself was more than dissatisfied and unemployed for years. He was the one dreaming totally unrealistic about life somewhere in Africa, wanting to go with his old caravan bus from Spain with a ship to North Africa and then drive through the desert to West Africa, because flying he would never do again. But if this didn't work, at least he wanted to live somewhere in Spain or Portugal. The language he knew neither of the one nor the other country. But at the moment Sabine and Tom were content with a weekend condo in the Lüneburger Heide. They had leased and now were found more often there than at home. Sabine loved the quiet of the country, and Tessie, her Labrador bitch, could walk around there how she pleased. We, too, Saidu, Michael and I, were often out there celebrating Sabine's birthday and other parties. Michael liked it out there because Tom always did some nonsense with him, like teaching him to drive and let him drive a car on the field. But now I avoided going there as I avoided all the places reminding me of Saidu. It was still quite cold when I set off for my first business trip, which took me to the even colder east, the Czech Republic, to the customers with whom I was in a permanent dispute on the phone. The engineer from the technical department was to accompany me. There should be a new contract negotiated, and the nagging problem of empty containers also fixed with the same contract. The flight was already a nightmare. In an icy wind, we were rocking in an old propeller aircraft of Czech Airlines. That reminded me very much of my trip with Ghana Airways. Under a terrible noise of the propeller drive from Hamburg to Prague, the capital of Czechia. It didn't make any difference that we were sitting in the business class, and I was glad when I could feel solid ground under my feet. Our trip was continued with a rental car, even though we both knew nothing about Prague. We combined the search for our hotel with a sightseeing tour, and I died again half with fear as a passenger when my colleague was particularly adapting to the fast driving and took every zebra crossing at full speed, without taking pedestrians into consideration. On my surprised look, he commented only, "If I stop here because of pedestrians, the one behind us slams on our back." The hotel itself, however, was worth the trip. First-class rooms, an excellent restaurant, and a cozy bar. Since it was very cold, and after the warm welcome at the airport, avoid lonely and poorly lit streets, do not wear valuables such as gold jewelry or mobile phones with you. We wish you a pleasant stay in Prague. We decided to stay better in the hotel. Unfortunately, didn't see more of Prague. At incredibly low prices, we had an excellent dinner in the restaurant, took a drink at the bar afterwards, and then I withdrew myself to the room to be fit for the next day. I was greatly impressed by this car manufacturing plant, or better said city, because the company grounds actually reached the size of a small town. I wondered, if one assumed East Company was big as this size, how giant must be the production of Volkswagen, BMW, or Daimler Chrysler. Our business partners were polite and courteous. We were offered coffee and biscuits when our interpreter entered, blond, blue-eyed, handsome face. But as he looked at me, I knew this wasn't only the interpreter, but also the man with whom I regularly fought over the phone. The negotiations were tough and complex, and showed me again why I was not necessarily impressed by the people in the East. But after 9 hours of negotiations, a new contract was signed and sealed with the conditions for the empties included. I could be proud of myself, because, as my colleague later described the business meeting in our company, I showed a lot of negotiating skills, technical as well as business acumen and proficiency, documentary optimally prepared for the personal clarification of the problem with the empties. Late we returned back to the hotel, had dinner, and after I felt tired into the comfortable bed. Early in the morning we would fly back to Hamburg. On the flight back, however, I vowed for the second time in my life never to fly again. I wasn't sure what was happening in the air, Siberian hurricanes or similar, but the machine just seemed to be thrown through the air. We swung from front to back, from left to right. A roller coaster was no objection. I was still pale as a white wall after my arrival at home. The feeling of success and the subsequent praise by the business management gave me back boost, self-confidence and strength to take my life in my hand. I colored my hair back and let it grow again, which caused facilitation and enthusiasm on all sides. Going out, however, was off limits for me, and men were deleted from my life. Saidu still called from time to time, but I cut it short mostly, avoided to follow his invitation to meet with him. Him or anyone else I wouldn't allow close to me anymore. My wounds were too deep. Sometimes I received visits by Rosa or Sabine during the weekend. Happily, they enjoyed to sit in my kitchen. Otherwise, it had become very quiet in my life, with exceptions. Kathy asked me one Saturday evening to take care of her children. She and Mark had planned to go to the movies. With Marcus, there were no problems. He was a dear child. Of course, sometimes was some dispute between Michael and Marcus, and he then complained, "Rita, Michael won't let me play on the PlayStation." That was a normal thing. The purest horror came over me at the thought of the screamer, who wouldn't even stay 2 minutes without Kathy, then opening the throat to terrorize his environment with his very typical penetrating screaming. He doesn't do it no more. He's a good boy now. When I bring him, he will be finished with feeding, clean and tired. Kathy tried to convince me. Finished with feeding? Your son is like Max, namely, never finished with feeding. I conceded suspicious, as if we were talking about a dangerous weapon. Please, just today. We also take both our mobile phones. If something is wrong, you can reach us. And you can also bet on it that I will do so if something is wrong. I shuddered at the evening, and when Kathy, already dressed up to go out, came with the children, I regretted it almost to have committed. Darrell, in general, didn't seem to be tired at all. How he was sitting on Kathy's lap, quietly looking around with big eyes. Kathy put him on his pillow, took a bottle out of her bag and a glass with baby food for him. Didn't you say he was already eaten? I asked, half in panic. He has. This is only for emergencies, if he gets hungry. Then give him the glass with the baby food. Told you, he's like Max, who can always eat. Kathy shoved the dummy in his mouth, and we waited for him to fall asleep. In fact, slowly his eyes closed, but immediately opened back up as soon as Kathy moved towards the door. She came back, sat patiently back down again. Where's Mark? I asked casually. Downstairs, waiting inside the car. I looked at the clock. Those two had patience. Then Darrell fell asleep and Kathy slipped away. Perhaps there was still a chance for me to watch my Saturday night show on television. Television was about the only pastime I gave myself. But this should, of course, not be so. Kathy wasn't even gone for 10 minutes as Darrell opened his eyes, raised his head and looked around, searching for Kathy. Of course he didn't see her and began the concert. I picked him up and tried to calm him down. But why should I succeed what so far nobody managed? This child possessed such a loud organ. I never experienced it yet with anyone else. Michael, who heard the screaming, just likely my neighbors and the residents of nearby houses, came into the living room where I sat helpless with the screamer on my lap. He took the dummy and shoved it back into Darrell's mouth, but he spat it out again. Give him something to eat, suggested my son. Michael took the glass and heated it in the microwave. Darrell screamed and screamed. I ran back and forth with him. He screamed. Nothing could stop him. Michael came back with the baby food. I tested it, whether it had the right temperature. It wasn't too hot, so I started to feed the screamer. Unfortunately, he wasn't certain whether to eat or scream, and took a deep breath just as I pushed him a spoonful in the mouth. And how could it be otherwise? He choked on porridge which clung in his throat as he tried to scream. He couldn't breathe. My God, I cried in panic, hitting him at the back. Mom, do something, called Michael, scared. What should I do? Never before had I been confronted with such a problem. Acting purely by intuition. Whether it was right, I had no idea. I grabbed him by the feet and left him dangling upside down while Michael slapped him continuously on the back. Indeed, it worked. The pulp dispatched and ran from the mouth over his face. I turned him over again, and no doubt he got air as he was screaming again. Only then was the crying interrupted by violent sobs, and real tears ran over his face. I was finished completely, picked up the phone and called Kathy. Without entering into any discussions, I urged, come and get the children. Now. Mama, the movie has not even started. Even better, get here now. I hung up. Of course, Mark and Kathy were pissed at me, but it interested me not at all. Pissed off I was also. Outraged, I reported what had happened and ended, "Never again, and I'm serious. Marcus at any time, but not Daryl." From time to time, Max also needed his lessons. He was still a child too, but one that learned quickly. After only 3 pairs of shoes he chewed, he learned he wasn't allowed to do it. And if a loud no was not enough, and the newspaper wasn't either, I grabbed him in the neck, picked him up, and shook him. Then he would cry like a child. If I ignored him totally, was for him the worst punishment. Or if I sent him away shouting, "Bad Max." If he did something wrong, he basically betrayed himself. When I came home from work and he made not the usual wild attempts, like wagging with his stubby tail, instead he waved in a way that shook the entire backside, but his stump tail was in a witty way tucked between the hind legs. He remained where he was and looked at me very humbly from below. Then I knew something was broken. After he caught a bird on the balcony and dragged it into the living room to play with it, which I only noticed when Kathy asked, "What odd ball is this Max is playing with?" "Yes, a ball with wings." I decided I would tolerate no bird killer in my house. So I extended my walks with him into game parks, where I taught him with patience not to chase after birds. In fact, I got him where I wanted to get him. He was no more bird hunting and peacefully walked towards birds to sniff them as far as they let him. His hardest lesson was when I almost felt sorry for him, as he had to learn he was not allowed to bring towards anyone, and definitely towards children, his teeth into use. Daryl, already crawling everywhere like a weasel, grabbed Max's leg and pressed it before I could intervene. Max snapped after Daryl. I grabbed him by the neck and shook him. Basically, he was a loving dog, and in this case he only defended himself. He learned he was not allowed, and in future ran away if Daryl was nearby. Things were very peaceful. Kathy visited me regularly with the children, but of course this should not continue. Initially, I was surprised when Mark's brother suddenly turned up again after a long time out of nowhere and lived back with them. Mark had now completed his studies but didn't have the idea of getting a real job. So all of them were sitting around in the house, including the children. I didn't like it but kept out of it, at least until Mark called me up one afternoon and asked me to come by after work. Kathy and he had something to discuss with me. What can that be? I asked myself. Rita. Kathy didn't want to say anything, but we have a big problem. We are with the rent 6 months in arrears, and if we don't pay at once, they chase us out of here. Rita, you have to help us. They had me overrun pretty well with this. At first, I didn't know what to say. I looked at Kathy, who sat like a bundle of misery, and said nothing. Where is the letter of the saga? Mark gave it to me. Mark, why don't you look for a job? You could earn good money. I have other plans at the moment. Yes, these I also had, and spoke out openly what I thought. Kathy, you have 2 strong men here in the house. They are not working, and bring no money home. And now you expect from me to pull the cart out the shit for you? This exactly I will not do, nor can I. The only thing I can offer you is to speak with my lawyer and see if she can do something. We don't need a lawyer. We need the rent, Mark argued, loud and angry. I shook my head, whereupon Mark sent me out of the apartment. I turned to Kathy, who still said nothing, nor looked me in the eye. Mark shouted at me, "Get out of here, and don't come back again." Only outside I realized I still held the letter in my hand. I felt guilty. Was I really doing the right thing? Didn't I have to help my daughter? At the end, the rent arrears would fall back on me anyway. The apartment was in my name, even though Kathy was registered with her name in the lease. Next day, I talked to my lawyer, showed her the letter, agreed that I would pay the legal fees, and she would negotiate with the housing company, with a score to reach a settlement. Nevertheless, this nut to crack, for me alone, was very difficult. I didn't know any more what was wrong or right. The first time since long, I drove out into the country to discuss my problem with Sabine. Sabine, I need your opinion. I have a problem I can't solve alone. Sabine rummaged in her garden, looked up surprised. You? That's something quite new, that you can't solve a problem alone. After I finished my report, she said, without thinking about it for long, Rita, are they crazy to come to you, so you have to stand for it now because 3 adults cannot be able to work? How long has your son-in-law been sitting at home without taking over responsibility for his family? Instead of it, he is dragging along a brother. For all the love and respect, but somewhere is a limit. You have already helped them by bringing the matter to a lawyer. If you're paying for it, that's okay. But paying the arrears for them, you're not going to help them, because in half a year they namely come to you again with the same problem. The lawyer actually managed to close the comparison. The case was withdrawn and the arrear position could be repaid in small installments. Nevertheless, I saw Kathy and the children no more during this year. After turbulent months in the company's proprietary software was replaced by an externally manufactured program, and all employees had to undergo weeks of training. One of the programmers, who had come all the way from England for the final touches on the program and to assist us in the beginning when initial problems occurred, managed actually to lure me a little from my reserve. Victor, a Ghanaian, grew up in England, where he studied computer science, now worked for the company SAP, and was in charge of the customer service. He discovered I possessed large enough basic knowledge to correct failures myself fairly soon. Finally, I had studied the subject once myself, but in computer science things changed too rapidly, and if one wasn't up to date for years, it wasn't easy to accustom in new systems, such as SAP, even though it was a pretty simple system really. Victor invited me to go out with him, and after a long time I accepted the invitation of a man. We visited a bar where we talked about computer subjects for hours. Although existed between us immediately attuned chemistry, except of friendship, nothing happened. There were 2 reasons. He was married, and I was not prepared to let my slowly healing wounds break open again. But it crackled between us without anything I could do about it, and our exchanged looks and talks were not hidden from my colleagues, of course. Daily we exchanged emails. He sent me as an attachment always something funny, such as films or drawings he had found on the internet, and thus I found my laughing humor again. Just before he flew back to England, we sat together again in the bar, where he confessed to me, if I wasn't married, then you would be the woman for me I would marry. Unfortunately, I've met you too late. I smiled but said nothing. Too late. How true. Victor joked, you know what? Let us make an appointment. Now, in 5 years, I will marry you. Furthermore, I now had to laugh. When he and his colleagues formally said goodbye to us, he repeated it again and got me quite embarrassed. Guys, this is the woman I'm going to marry in 5 years' time, and gave me a goodbye kiss on the cheek. Through Victor, finally, I realized I quickly had to change something in my life before it was really too late. First, I surfed through the internet for a favorable vacation and discovered a great deal for exactly the destination I had in mind, Fuengirola in southern Spain. A fortunate travel. I had absolutely no idea what it was. My boss explained to me, this is a package with flight, hotel and half board. However, the hotel is unknown until the arrival, so it can be a pleasant surprise but also an evil one. And that's why it is cheap. The tour operator, however, was known with a prestigious name. Michael, let us fly together on vacation. Michael looked at me suspiciously. With you on vacation? No, you are too stressful. I can't sleep longer for one single day, and then you do crazy things, like almost crash with a jeep and so on. Michael, I promise, no more crazy things. And I'll let you sleep longer too. Where? To Spain. Oh no, you're too embarrassing. After you go jump into the water again with clothes on and chat to all the people. The whole evening I worked hard to persuade Michael until he finally surrendered. And what about Max? He asked, hoping we dropped the plan because of Max. Actually, this was a good question. I wondered and thought of Ushi. Only problem was the small mongrel bitch. She didn't like Max. Ushi agreed and conceded my concerns aside. But Snoopy is a typical blonde bitch who just acts as if she wants to know nothing of Max. You'll see when you come back. They sleep together in one basket. Before the holidays, however, we celebrated Max's first birthday. Or better, we celebrated and he felt offended. Before, I wondered what good I could do him, except from toys, on this particular day. Sabine suggested give him a dried pig's ear. All dogs are crazy for it. Tessie loves those things too. But Max was not all dogs. He was happy initially about the new rubber toys, which squeaked wonderfully loud, and also about the dog biscuits and ran excitedly back and forth. But when he sniffed skeptically the pig ear, I realized Max was bitchy. He didn't only ignore the pig ear contemptibly, but me also. Michael wanted to bend over with laughter when Max came running up to him, but not to me. For some reason, I had insulted Max deadly with my birthday present. Excited, we went on our flight to Spain, and as we lowered after 3.5 hours to the landing approach, leveraging the dangerous mountains near Malaga, I had since a long time once again this liberating feeling to be able to exhale deeply. A feeling of indescribably happiness filled me, a feeling like someone returning back home after a long time. We rode on the coach that had picked us up from the airport, passing through all possible smaller and larger villages to drop off the travelers at the various hotels. All of them gave a decent impression. Finally, we stopped in front of our hotel, Vera Mar. From outside, this hotel also appeared quite well at first glance. At the second, I noticed the construction work on the left in front of the entrance, next to the swimming pool. Cranes and excavators were working here in a noisy swing. The hall was at first also quite cozy with a large sofa, several chairs, and a table in the middle. At the head end of the hall, which was approximately the size of my living room, was the reception. On closer inspection, I realized sofa and chairs were pretty worn out, and I wondered whether one could dare to settle here without catching fleas. The elderly Spaniard at the reception was very nice, and glad to have for a change a tourist with whom he could speak Spanish. I didn't have to twist his tongue with the English language. From our room I was pleasantly surprised. It was decorated in typical Spanish rustic style and very comfortable, but without any comfort. There was neither a fan nor air conditioning, and certainly not a phone. If one wished something from the reception, one just had to go down the stairs. Namely, the lift was out of service. All of this could not dim my mood. Finally, we wasn't going to spend our holidays inside the room, but came back here only to sleep. Michael was already less euphoric, but this, so I made up my mind I would change soon. First, I wanted to know which end of Fuengirola we were, and how far it was to the restaurant of Jackie. The friendly man at the reception desk explained to me, and there it fell again, the words, always straight ahead. I knew this already. We walked in brilliant sunshine, and for me, pleasant 35 degrees. Hamburg was forgotten with its cold and wet weather. 10 minutes, the receptionist had talked about, was exactly the time we needed to reach the beach and the sea. As usual, at the sight of the sea, my heart beat faster. An inner voice said, "Here you belong. Here and nowhere else is your place." But across the road, To the beach we didn't come, for now, because on the street corner was an ice cream parlor with ice cream reminding me strongly of the one in Torremolinos. Of course, Michael could not resist at the sight. "Mom, let's eat ice cream." Why not? We were on vacation, and had all the time in the world. Enthusiastically, Michael exclaimed, "The ice cream tastes much better here than in Germany," as he spooned his enormous cup. I contented myself with a smaller one, looking dreamily over to the sea. To live here would be like living in paradise, I said more to myself than to Michael. Barefoot, with our beach sandals in hand, we walked along the beach, feet in the lovely warm water. Now I realized the beach making a big bow, and at the other end were the high-rise hotels I knew already from my last visit. "There we have to go," I showed Michael, who rolled his eyes. I looked carefully to the other side, where restaurants and bars were, and actually saw the Chinese restaurant Jones had invited me to. How long ago was it? The time I first had thought of emigrating here. Also, the beach was nice here, with its fine sand. I had to, however, admit I liked more the beach in Torremolinos, with its special flair of the bars and restaurants directly on the beach, with the terraces on where one looked directly at the nearby sea. Predominantly short before the port were bars and discos, from where loud house music sounded. Here was the end of the beach, and the port facility began. We came straight up to a big amusement park for children, which I didn't remember from last time, and believed it was new. Logically, we couldn't just pass here. It was a pure paradise for Michael, with an enormous air-cushioned castle, various carousels, water games, races with remote-controlled motorboats. Michael was busy for hours, while I was amused at one of the booths with coffee and cola. It was long, late, and dark, but I didn't want to rush Michael. He had so much fun. Seeing him laugh, so cheerful in this paradise, was the most beautiful gift for me. Later we walked through the illuminated harbor towards Jackie's restaurant, but everything was already closed. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. Our dinner we had missed well by hours on our first evening. All around here was closed, and we were hungry. "Let's go to McDonald's," Michael suggested, when we returned to the noisy quarter. Well, our first dinner had to be supposedly hamburger with fries. Instead of the beach, we took the road back through the city. I figured that it must be shorter, because we were saving the big bow. On the way, I bought fresh baked waffles at one booth for us. Michael liked those for his life. Then we strolled through the city center, which was very empty at this time. I found a travel agency offering excursions in the window, Gibraltar shopping tour, Monkey Rock containing dolphin ocean voyage, all for €80. Morocco, Tangier, ferry from Algeciras with many attractions, sightseeing and lunch, €120. To this travel agency I would probably come back again. The outlays of the other windows didn't exactly pull me off the stool. In this respect, Torremolinos won as well. At 3 o'clock in the morning we entered our hotel room, where we were greeted by hot, sticky air. Michael groaned at first. He couldn't sleep in this heat, but after taking a cold shower, fell into a deep sleep. In the morning I was, as always on holidays, already awake early, showered, dressed, looked at Michael, and reminded myself of my promise not to wake him. The hotel seemed somehow safe. I could leave him sleep in peace. He would already know where to find me, namely in the large dining room with a delicious breakfast buffet, accompanied by animating Spanish music. The two waiters were moving to the beat of the music while they poured coffee and tea. This gaiety was contagious to me, and I gave those two a saucy smile. The majority of the guests were English. The rest were Spanish from the inland, such as Madrid, wanting to spend their vacation on the beach also. Unlike in other hotels, the breakfast buffet was opened up to 11 in the morning. I learned from one of the waiters, so Michael had time enough. I had a look around at the entrance and at the pool where the construction noise was. Luckily, our room was on the other side. The children in the pool didn't seem to be disturbed by the noise, and the parents, English in the deck chairs around it, apparently neither. I walked down the road a bit to the grocery store I had discovered the day before and entered the store with a greeting, Buenos dias. I was greeted just as friendly by the store owner. The Spanish are very friendly towards the tourists, but still a touch more hearty when one speaks their language. Of course, I wasn't perfect, but I understood and was able to make me understood. While I paid for cigarettes and drinks at the checkout, we came into conversation, and the man wanted to know everything about me. I forgot the time. With horror, I saw it was already 11:30. But in the friendly hotel, they didn't look at things so serious, and Michael was still allowed to have breakfast at 11:30. Then he dived into the swimming pool. For me, it was too loud, so I sat down with a coffee on the flea sofa. The elderly gentleman from the reception told me he had worked earlier as so-called guest worker in Germany, but now was much happier back in Spain. We talked for a long time. I enjoyed it and could hardly remember the last time I had a nice informal conversation. It burst out of me. I am thinking since quite a long time to emigrate here. How are the property prices and rents? Now he certainly started giving me a long lecture where one could buy or rent the best and that one shouldn't buy in any case in Fuengirola. It was just too expensive. Not only the purchase price, but also the property taxes. About 20 minutes from here, by foot to the Castillo, begins Mijas. There the prices are much lower. Work is also sufficient, particularly if one is multilingual. Finally, I picked myself up to grab my bathing suit. Michael had already found friends by the pool and didn't actually want to join me to the beach. His new English friend had left him his air mattress he roamed about with, but the sea lured him also, and he agreed to meet with his friend later. It was a beautiful afternoon at the beach, and we were playing hilarious in the sea. No one here looked at us stupid, neither Spanish nor tourists. Indeed, Michael drew some attention here and there, but simply because he was a handsome boy. Towards the evening, we made our second attempt to arrive at Jackie's restaurant. She was honestly happy to see me again. With a stunning view across the harbor, we had steak, salad, and fries. Jackie and I sat talking into the night with coffee and sangria, while Michael watched the Sky program on television out on the terrace. We were both so tired that we ordered a taxi for the way back. To my surprise, Michael got up in the morning along with me, and we had breakfast together. Michael noticed how euphoric and good-humored I was. "You're well on it," he remarked. I beamed at him. "How about it, if it was like this forever? How do you like it here?" "It's cool here." "Could you imagine living here?" "Mama, are you intending to move here?" "I still have no plans, but I'm thinking seriously about it." For Michael meant to think about it far away, and therefore, initially, the subject was checked off for him. He was already on the jump to meet his friends at the pool. "Michael, I will go to town. That's okay?" "Yes, yes. And this afternoon I'm planning a trip with you," I announced. But here Michael was less enthusiastic. My trips he already knew. I strolled through the city, looked around in some shops, but here was really nothing what attracted me to buy. In the travel agency, I booked the 2-day trips to Gibraltar and Morocco. And on the way back, I allowed myself a café con leche in a street cafe and was happy of life. At the hotel pool, Michael approached me with the news. "New people have arrived. Germans." night he pulled the word Germans in the length. The hall was full of people with suitcases. Flea sofa and chairs were all occupied, and everywhere I heard people speak German, which didn't necessarily have me enthusiastic. Beside the entrance was a deck now. Curious, I looked what was on it. It was of the same travel agency I booked our holiday. I had an idea and took the opportunity to sit down as a place was vacant on the flea sofa. But no one here speaks German. It's rather odd, I heard to my right. My head flew around to see the idiot who dropped this comment. Sorry, may I remind you we are here in Spain? I could not resist to remark and caught some evil looks. On Mallorca, they all speak German, I heard to my left now. A woman, blonde, short hair, about mid-50s. Despite the stupid comment, she possessed a lymphatic laugh when she introduced herself. Hi, I'm Rosie. Have you been here long? I also introduced myself, and soon I found me in a funny conversation with Rosie. I learned she was a bored wife and housewife, living with her husband under one roof, but he lived upstairs and she downstairs. Normally, she flew to Mallorca every year where they owned a holiday home, but now she was here going to meet her secret boyfriend from Morocco. I soon realized Rosie was just as crazy as I, and we could have probably some fun together. The lady from the travel agency arrived and greeted everybody. After the formally welcoming of the guests and information on this and that, she offered to answer any questions. I reported to speak. Dear lady, I can see I booked a fortunate trip and expect no special comfort, but I can't sleep longer in the morning due to the construction noise. The sun terrace I can't use for the same reason. I would like to ask if some of my travel costs could be refunded. The woman had been completely overrun by me because she didn't have me on her plan, and generally no one who was already here for 3 days, so she was not set to complaints. She promised to talk with the agency to achieve a credit for me. When she asked me if I was alone here, I told her I was with my son. She promptly gave me 2 vouchers for the Aqua Park in Mijas. Quietly, I said to Rosie, she doesn't need to know my room is on the other side. We both giggled about it like silly little girls. The lady was now working diligently to sell day trips. Morocco for €250, Gibraltar €150, etc. I was staggered until Rosie let herself persuade for a trip to Granada and Seville. This is far too expensive here. In the travel agency in the city, I had paid only half. I was outraged. Yes, if you speak Spanish, it's not a problem. Then you can do it. But I understand nothing. But it doesn't matter. I won't buy any more, Rosie answered. Michael joined us, and Rosie was completely smitten by him. That's a pretty boy, your son. Michael and I went to the ticket office for the dolphin ride. The mother of my French friend was still sitting there. She looked up when I asked for her daughter, and after a moment she recognized me. Her daughter wouldn't come to Spain until the next month. I introduced Michael to her and was going to buy tickets for the ride, as she gestured, "But you're our guest." It was a beautiful ride on the boat, and we enjoyed the glorious sun on the deck. Dolphins, we didn't see any this time, but for the many children on board, a disco was organized on the way back. This day we actually managed to make it on time for dinner. We shared a table with Rosie and a young couple from Berlin. Also, at first, I thought it was a little girl with her father at my opposite, until she convinced me, laughing, she was already 22 and married. The hot buffet was good and plentiful. It provided for every taste. Michael held on to chips with chicken wings, and for dessert, ice cream as much as he wanted. I only ate a salad because I preferred the breakfast, mixed English and German, buns with cheese or cold cuts, toast with fried egg, bacon, baked beans, of course, a lot of coffee, and freshly squeezed orange juice. After dinner, again, accompanied by upbeat Spanish music, that appealed daily better to me, Michael disappeared with his friends. But I warned him not to come back too late, for the morning we would go early to Gibraltar. We took our coffee to sit down first on the flea couch and had with a couple from Berlin a joyful start of the night. Rosie and I later took a walk, and I showed her the way to the sea. She would also go on her trip to Granada the next day. We all had agreed to be spending together the day after the next on the beach. On the way back we found a street cafe near the hotel to indulge in our passion, café con leche. In the morning I didn't only break my promise not to wake Michael, but did this by splashing cold water in his face. The crazy Rita was back again, and was doubling with laughter when Michael jumped up angry and shouted, "Are you nuts?" However, I contaminated Michael with my laughter, and we both laughed silly while Michael threw pillows at me. At 6 o'clock we waited in front of the Mercado, where the coach would pick us up. At 10 o'clock we reached La Línea, the Spanish border town to Gibraltar. I was a little surprised that only a few people from the coach came with us to the ship, which would take us on the sea voyage to see dolphins. Michael pouted, still tired. "There are no dolphins anyway. Yesterday we didn't see any." The sea here was much rougher, and we rocked back and forth pretty much, but we were on the Atlantic Ocean, and no longer in the Mediterranean Sea. The wind was stronger and fresher here, although it was hot. After about 40 minutes out in the open ocean actually, a group of dolphins turned up at the side of the ship. The engine was turned off, and the next was for Michael an unforgettable experience. The dolphins stretched their bodies as far from the water, so Michael, lying on the plank, was able to touch their noses. Fascinated, I held this event down with the pictures I shot with my camera. After about 10 minutes, the engine started again, and the ship began to move slowly. The dolphins were still holding their heads above the water, and when we reached full speed, they jumped up and swam alongside with us. Happy, Michael beamed at me. I was, in this moment, very happy and extremely grateful. We both realized there were indeed existing things in this life, beautiful and worth it to be living for. After returning to the harbor, Michael and I strolled towards the border of Gibraltar. We crossed the border after a strict pass control. On the Gibraltar side of the border, we were in for a further surprise. The oversized wide road leading to the peninsula of Gibraltar serves simultaneously as a runway for the Gibraltar airport. The moment we were on the way, a traffic light changed to red, gates closed, and the next moment an aeroplane rolled past us only a few meters away. Our jaws dropped in surprise. Airplanes on a street? Yes, here they were. The explanation for this was this small country, which geographically belonged to Spain, but territorially belonged to Great Britain, not really owned space for an airport. But as an independent country in need of one, therefore the wide street was divided for this purpose. I envied nobody who had to take off from here, because the runway was extremely short, and passing the Monkey Rock was a millimeter precise matter. Michael attentively listened to me as I explained this to him, while we walked to the parking lot where the trip to the huge Monkey Rock, protruding from the middle of Gibraltar, should start. An agent of the tour operation awaited us already, but consoled us we had to wait a little until the minibus returned from its tour. We waited, and waited, and waited. Michael's patience had long been on end, and somehow my patience too. Finally, the young woman explained there was a breakdown, and on this day no tour would take place anymore. "Then give me back the fare," I demanded. This she couldn't do. I would have to turn to the travel agency. However, she gave us 2 vouchers and bus tickets for a safari park in Estepona, near Marbella. I took them. However, was very annoyed, because in 1.5 hours our bus would leave back to Malaga already. So now our time was just sufficient for a snack and buying a carton of cigarettes for 8 euros. In Spain, the costs of cigarettes were now between 10 and 12 euros per carton, but still much cheaper than in Germany for 20 euros. We headed back over the border without having seen even the slightest of Gibraltar. At dinner we arrived as rather last. I was still angry. Rosie suggested, "Let's have a drink at the bar, so your anger vanishes." She herself didn't drink alcohol. I ordered a pina colada. Rosie told me about her visit of Granada and the Alhambra, conceded though it was quite a climb and the heat was almost unbearable, as opposed here at the coast. After the third pina colada I felt great and my anger was forgotten. We fooled around with the English who were dominating the bar, and I flirted with the handsome Spanish waiters. "What is sex on the beach?" I asked, playing naive, after I read the sign at the bar. "A cocktail. For 5 euro. Is the waiter included in the price?" The poor guy didn't know which way to look with embarrassment, and Rosie shook with laughter. My headache reminded me of the 3 pina coladas I had the night before. "This sweet shit I'm not going to drink again," I mumbled at breakfast, as the young woman from Berlin, already fit for the beach, called, "Come on, let's go, otherwise it will be too late." Even Michael was ready with the inherited air mattress of his departed friend, tucked under his arm. "I'm coming. I'll put myself on a sun chair and sleep," I announced. But no one took me serious. On the way to the beach I had to laugh about all the baggage the Berliners took with them, just like real tourists. On the beach the woman ran across the sand like a rabbit in a zigzag to find the right place. Patiently we all trotted behind. Her husband offered a more than funny sight as he followed her in line, laden with beach chair, beach bag, deep freezing bag, and most of all, the open sun umbrella. I rolled with laughter at the sight and began to sing, "I'm singing in the rain." Rosie was infected by my laughter. I rented a deck chair, put sun lotion on me, and was lying down on the deck chair. The sea was more agitated than usual this day, the waves higher. "Don't go too far into the sea," I warned Michael, and closed my eyes. In fact, I did doze away, and this time I was the one who offered the comical sight, because when I opened my eyes again, the deck chair was already surrounded with water, as high as the tide had increased. "If you don't get up soon, you'll swim away along with your deck chair," remarked the young woman, laughing. I moved the deck chair further onto the beach and jumped into the water. Michael was also back in the sea with a Berlin woman. The two were raging with the air mattress, for my taste too far out. Worried now, I watched as the waves were beating above their heads. Apparently, having enough, they came back. "Mum, I was really scared in the waves." But Michael laughed as he remarked this. After dinner, the others withdrew themselves. Michael, who liked to go through his own way now, and I didn't want to tie him to me constantly, moved off with his new friends. So I set off for a walk to the Castillo. I was offered a charming sight of the castle on a hill, lit up by romantic lights. This was the moment my decision fell. With my phone I tried to call Jones, but couldn't reach him. I called Raymond, his brother. He was very pleased about my call after all this long time. "You're in Malaga? Then you have to pass by." I promised it and asked him to let Jones know I needed to talk to him. Another motive was, however, I suddenly wished very much to have this cuddly teddy bear at my side. For a long time I was aware again of how much I was longing for a strong shoulder and for tenderness. I had long repressed this feeling. Without realizing it, I was already gone so far I had left behind the castle and was now on a pitch-dark path. No one was here, only the sound of the sea I could hear. Otherwise it was quiet. "Are you crazy to walk around in this lonely corner?" I asked myself, and returned back running. Back in the lantern light I felt safer, but wasn't tired yet, and so I walked onto the beach road where the tourists were sitting in the bars or strolled across the promenade. I was painfully aware of predominantly couples. I entered a Latino disco I already noticed earlier. The music playing here was like the music in the hotel, and I could feel it getting into my blood. Not long, and I was asked to dance. The Spaniards were dancing a mixture of salsa and disco fox. I quickly adapted myself to the step, and had a lot of fun dancing with various Spanish men, and experiment the turns. I was invited for a drink. The Spaniard tried to persuade me to take a ride with him in his car to the beach. Driving? The beach was right outside of the door. Of course, I knew what he wanted. Suddenly I remembered with a hot and cold wave the next day, or better, today, the trip to Morocco was scheduled. I immediately left the nightclub, took a taxi to the hotel, and was relieved Michael was sometimes more reasonable than me. He was sleeping soundly. It was already 4 o'clock in the morning, and so I decided not to go to bed any more. At 6 o'clock we had to be at the Mercado. In the bus on the way to Algeciras, I dozed, half asleep, until we reached the ferry terminal. After 4 interminable hours on the ferry, we arrived in Tangier. Michael was not little surprised when I explained to him we were now on the African continent. On this continent your father was born, and his parents, your grandparents. However, we are in the north. Your origin is West Africa, practically speaking on the other side of Africa. Impressed, Michael asked, "So Africa is only 4 hours away from Europe?" "Coming from the Spanish side to North Africa, yes. Up to West Africa it is much further. We were beaten by heat with much higher humidity than in Spain. It took a while until my body adapted to this climate. For Michael it was simply too hot, and the smell wasn't necessarily pleasant for neither of us. Our Moroccan guide, a friendly and funny man, greeted us, and immediately took a liking to Michael. He made it his business to take care of him personally. Once again we boarded a tour bus and rode initially to the outskirts, somewhere in a desert area, where we stopped for the first time. Immediately numerous flying dealers poured on us to offer goods for sale. Camels stood ready to be ridden by the excursionists. Many got involved in the fun. I didn't. Michael, normally a little scared, considered this matter a bit risky. We limited ourselves to the observation how the others made themselves idiots, and preferred to feed and fondle a young small camel calf. I shot some photos of Michael and the small camel with my digital camera, my constant companion. Then we continued with our tour, which took us next through the rich residential area on the coast, with beautiful houses, the presidential palace, and beautiful parks. The beaches were like painted, and invited to go on vacation here. We saw fine sandy beach lined with palm trees, other rare trees and plants. The sea was blue and clear. Then we were introduced to the extreme opposite of this beauty, the poor district of Tangier. Never before I had seen so much poverty and misery like this. Even Michael was horrified about the children running barefoot across the filthy streets, with torn clothes, diseases evident at first glance, begging for money and food. In Ghana there was poverty, sure, but what I saw here was much worse. Here the children weren't even able to laugh anymore. Instead, everywhere just sad, hopeless faces. Michael was totally overwhelmed, and reacted, peevish, with the sight of those children seeking in company of rats for food in the garbage. Penetrating stench everywhere in the air made it practically almost impossible to breathe. Against one town wall we watched various snake charmers who lured with their flutes the cobras out of their baskets, writhing to the sound of flutes. Some of these men were kissing the cobras on their snouts. It was fascinating, but we were both really happy to leave this area. A few minutes of bus ride later, we stopped at a parking lot. Our guide, who spoke perfect English, Spanish, and French, gave us strict instructions to stay together in a group, as someone would be lost here, be very difficult to find him back. Further, he warned not to buy anything of these dealers on the street. The risk of bag theft was too high, and the dealers too expensive. Later he was going to take us to a bazaar where more favorable souvenirs were offered. Inside the roofed market, it was strictly forbidden by the police to take photographs. It could cost the camera. However, I didn't acoustically hear the part with the camera. Heard only something about shooting photos. I didn't worry about it either. After we got out of the bus to walk through the labyrinth of this old town, I understood perfectly what the tour guide meant with its warning. The streets were so convoluted and fogged in all directions. They all looked alike and seemed to be endless. One could actually be lost easily here. Instinctively, I grabbed Michael's hand tightly. On each of the small paths, dealers had built up tables, but the worst and intrusive were the flying dealers, not only coming in groups of 3 or 4 at the tourists, but besieged and loudly animated to buy. If we got rid of one group by a loud "no thanks," we were already encircled by the next one. This made it difficult not to lose the group. Besides, it was of course also important to pay attention to bags and valuables at the same time. Michael strongly expressed his protection instinct concerning me by yelling at the men. He was getting very aggressive, and I could see he would have loved to beat those men. So I had all hands full to calm Michael, to keep the survey, to watch bags and push away the dealers coming too close. It was anything but a pleasant trip. It was nerve-wracking and stressful. I wished nothing more than my hotel bed, because on top of everything, my sleepless night was now taking its toll on me. I was relieved when we stopped walking through this labyrinth of streets and entered the market hall. But here, the stress should start properly. As usual, I was fascinated by this mixed market with its various products: fruits, the smells of herbs, spices, and scent oils, incense sticks, and tobacco pipes. Automatically, I grabbed my camera and started to shoot photos of the market stands with its variety and the women covered in their burqas up to their eyes. Suddenly, an old woman came screaming and shouting, gesticulating wildly, running towards me, followed by other women and men who had become aware of her shouting. "Mama!" Michael screamed in a fit of panic. Luckily, our guide and his assistant were close by. Both came running at us from the other direction. A violent and loud discussion flared up, the people pointing accusing fingers at me. I possessed not the faintest idea what I had been guilty for. But the situation was scary. I could already see myself in a Moroccan prison. Somehow our guide managed to calm the angry crowd, while his assistant took Michael by the hand and laid protective his arm around my shoulder. Both of them conducted us outside as fast as possible. Laughing, he explained to me the reason for the turmoil, and urged me not to have listened to him. I apologized for the incident, but vowed to have nothing heard of not taking photographs. "You've been lucky. The people were already in the process to call the police. Then the camera would have been gone." Only now I noticed how my knees were shaking, and Michael scolding, "You and your shit photos! Just pack away that camera!" didn't make it better. My patience was at end. I was tired, annoyed. I felt dirty and full of dust. My stomach growled with hunger, and so I allowed myself to be talked to and persuaded completely involuntarily by two salesmen in another bazaar. They wanted to sell me scent oils, soaps, creams, carpets, spices, and God knows what all. With my last strength, I bought a cute hand-carved camel to have at least one souvenir from Morocco. Meeting up afterwards with the other group members, carrying heavy carpets and large shopping bags, and I just dragged myself to the restaurant where we were served an Oriental menu very similar to the dishes of my former favorite restaurant, Baluchistan, accompanied to traditional Oriental sounds and the performance of a belly dancer. Michael, however, wouldn't touch anything he didn't know, refused to eat despite hunger. Once again, the guide had to intervene and convince the kitchen staff to organize fried from somewhere. The ferry taking us back to the European continent was much newer and faster. In just 2 hours we reached the port of Algeciras. But even those 2 hours were too long for us, because we were both so irritated and tired of this trip we almost fell into battle. But in one point we were of the same opinion: Morocco, never again. In the morning we actually did fall into dispute, caused by the fact I woke Michael again at 6 o'clock. "Are you crazy? I've had enough of your excursions. You can go by yourself to the safari park. Leave me alone. I want to sleep." It cost me all of conviction to get him up so we could have breakfast before departure at 8 o'clock. Michael was still much under the impression of the day before and had a pretty bad attitude. "I knew you wouldn't keep your promise, Mama. We are on vacation and I can't sleep 1 day longer. You and your trips. I don't want to see anything anymore, and this was the last time I came with you on vacation. Never again," he mumbled on during the entire trip to Estepona. "I'm just curious what's gonna go wrong again today." He shouldn't be all too wrong with it. At about 38 degrees heat, we were climbing up initially some high mountains to see wild animals from Africa and other countries in huge outdoor enclosures. As much as I like to watch animals, but this degenerated into rather heavy work and wasn't a pleasure at all. Michael glared at me with some nasty looks. His mood improved a little as we found on the side of the paths installed cold showers we used fully dressed to refresh. Soon after we reached the station for an open train running slowly through the park, stopping at different stations to give the visitors a choice to come off and continue their way on foot, partly on foot or on the train. Our need of walking was covered for this day already, and so we watched a beautiful park with water holes, as in Africa, where elephants and rhinos refreshed themselves in the seats of the open wagon. The special attraction of the park was an original replica of a tribal African village with real straw huts of clay. Impressed and long reconciled, Michael watched everything from his seat opposite to me as suddenly several Africans in lumber protection and war paint jumped onto our wagon and under war howl, swinging their machetes, taking a hostage. In terror, my heart slipped into my pants. Michael, with one big jump hanging at my neck, screaming on top of his voice. Of course, this was a wonderfully rehearsed scenario, which should serve as a highlight, but this type of animation is not recommendable for people with weak hearts. Michael was still crying and sniffling as one of these actors sat next to him in his war paint and explained it was all just for show. I did realize I certainly wasn't gathering plus point of Michael with my ideas of day trips, and it wouldn't get any better after the beautiful falcons and eagles show we attended, fascinated, and left the park to realize our bus was long gone already. We stood in the middle of Valachaya, and I had absolutely no idea how we could get back to Fuengirola. The trip ended as it began. Michael cursed me and swore. A woman and her son also just left the park and headed for the parking lot. I asked her if she knew how we could get a bus to Fuengirola. She told me no, but we got into conversation and explained to her our bad luck. She invited us spontaneously to climb into the car and brought us to the front door of the hotel, where we once again were the last ones for the dinner course. Rosie had been looking for us already. "Now you tell me where you two have been since yesterday. We didn't see you neither for breakfast nor throughout the day." The evil look of Michael made me answer, "Let us rather not talk about it." Rosie reminded me, "This evening the flamenco show is in the ballroom. You're coming or not?" and turned to Michael. "I want to dance flamenco with you." Michael forgot in his bad mood entirely his manners, tugged with his finger at his forehead at Rosie and grumbled irritably, "Rosie's as crazy as you," said this and disappeared. Since his friends, however, participated in this event, Michael also showed up later on. My table companions laughed tears about my trip report. Our table was already drawing attention, as we were the loudest, and this really did mean something amongst all those British. The flamenco show was really worth watching, alone for the enchanting traditional clothes of the dancers and the fiery music. The dancers harvested thunderous applause. Then they came for the audience, dragging them on the stage to dance with them. Of course, they came for me too. I quickly saw as Michael disappeared behind the windshield panel for fear they would also pull him on the stage. I tried not to make myself too much an idiot and managed the steps quite well. My table applauded when I came back. Only Michael, now turned up again, criticized, "Mum, you are so embarrassing. I don't know you." When I showed Rosie at breakfast the photos of our trips, stored in my camera, we were still pouring out laughing when I told her about our experiences while we were bobbing our heads and swaying to the music, together with the waiters. "One thing I must leave you, though. You are very encouraged to do all these trips alone with your son. When I hear about all these mishaps, I think I wouldn't dare." I told her about the Latino disco, and she exclaimed enthusiastically, "Can't we go together?" Thus, we agreed to meet for the evening. She wanted to go to the beach with a couple from Berlin, but I had already very different plans. "Michael, you have a mind to go with me to Marbella?" I asked very carefully when he got up at 11 o'clock. His look said it all, so I tried a different tactic. "You like big cars such as Ferrari and Porsche and so, right? In Marbella, all the stars are living, and such just people with money, and they all have expensive cars, and of course they are seen there as a mass scale." The fish swallowed the bait, though reluctantly. We were on our way with bathing clothes and all, taking a regular bus to Marbella. In the center we came off and strolled past boutiques and expensive stores. Here the outlays in the shopping windows were much more attractive than in Fuengirola, only the prices were not. They were horrendous. We stopped at a garden restaurant in the old town and ate lunch. "And where are the cars?" Michael asked, slightly impatient, when we walked towards the beach. "Now wait, but we will see them soon enough." I wasn't too sure myself, though. Until then, we hadn't even seen a lousy Porsche. The beach of Marbella was a show for itself. Great white beach bars and restaurants, clean and fine white sand with noble sunbeds, umbrellas and tables set right for the guests by the waiters. One needed to get himself comfortable, snapped for the waiter, then the chilled drinks were served at the table. The sea was a transparent blue, and we swam and splashed happily in the water. Ostensibly, I held my drink in the air when I deigned to sunbathe on the sunbed and felt like a movie star in commercials for sun lotion. The fact that I paid for this luxury a small fortune didn't interest me at all this moment. Late afternoon, I proposed to break up to be present at dinner on time for once. Michael seemed to have forgotten about the cars, fortunately. But those he remembered again when we waited 3 hours for a bus, and he definitely lost his patience with me and my trips. What to do? There was no bus coming, at least not in our direction. In glittering heat, we stood our legs into the stomach, hungry and thirsty. The schedule at the bus stop I didn't understand at all, but only like every 30 minutes was supposed to be a bus going. Well, sure was we couldn't leave to be missing the bus in the end, which never came. While Michael decided to punish me with contempt, at best threw me a dirty look, I admired the patience of the Spaniards coming to the bus stop to keep us company or divide the same destiny. I waited without a murmur or moving a muscle. After 2 hours, a woman joined the party with a girl about Michael's age. She spoke in German with the girl, and therefore I asked her when and if a bus would be expected here. She gave me information normally every 30 minutes. A bus actually would come, and assumed probably a breakdown or an accident was the cause for the continuing delay, but was utterly amazed to hear we already waited since 2 hours. A conversation started, and she told me she usually went by car. She and her husband had built a new life far away from Germany, in the neighborhood of Marbella, and they were totally happy. I looked at Michael, who was himself immersed in a conversation with a girl. She told me they had bought a little house very cheap during the time of the peso, which was no longer all that easy since the euro. Work? Oh, there is always something to find. You need not to worry. The last hour of waiting just flew by, and we eventually shared seats on the bus when the girl spoke the deciding words to Michael, which settled the decision for both of us. We learned the girl was suffering from asthma in Germany, but here she was completely healthy. Then she told us very proudly they had 3 months summer school holidays. Bingo! Mama, I want to live here too. He looked me straight in the eye when he said it. Michael, are you serious? He grinned, but nodded. The waiters of our hotel, I had by now a friendly relationship with, were already accustomed to pick our food from the kitchen, as by our evening arrivals the buffet had long been dismantled. Michael, his anger with me long forgot, asked cautiously after dinner, Mom, do you really want to move to Spain? And you? Don't you want? Think about it. Never again asthma. No more idiots like the ones in your school. Well, and 3 months summer holidays. And all year round. Sun, beach and sea. Yes, I want it. But what are you going to work here? Ah, I think I'll find something. But I'm trying to figure it out at the moment. And this I really did. I had something in mind to start my own business, because with a job I would not be able to provide the both of us. Here in Spain, the salaries were much lower. There were a lot of those locutorios, but they were all very impersonal, at best, with machines for cold drinks. Not a bit of atmosphere, and no advice or help for problems with computers or software. Here was a market gap I was planning to fill. Rosie knocked on the door and came in when I was still sitting on our balcony, lost in my thoughts. She was already dressed to go out. Oh, I had totally forgotten about it. What's up? Don't you want to go out any more? Oh, yes. I have only been thinking. Namely, we have decided to move here. What did you have? We sat a few hours on the balcony, and I spoke for the first time with someone about my feelings, my desires, and how uncomfortable I was in Germany. But you have a great job, a high salary. You can still go on holidays 3 times a year. Do you want to risk your security? She won't. What security, Rosie? For how long? Germany is on its best way to go down the drain. Should I wait until I'm old or the company closes its doors? I live now, and I believe to be now still young enough to dare a new beginning. Whether I can still do it in 10 years from now, I don't know. Mainly, though, I'm thinking about Michael. He is just as unhappy as I am in Germany, as I have been all my life. I want my son to grow up happy and free from discrimination. Here, nobody gives him stupid looks because of his skin color, and here he has a chance to live without asthma. On the other hand, what do we have back in Germany? Family? Forget it. Friends? Can be found elsewhere too, and Spain is not out of the world either. True friends stay in touch. Anyone who wants can visit us. A super chic apartment, I'm sorry, but material things don't make me happy. And now, don't come with these talks like everyday life is also hard here and elsewhere and not a permanent vacation. This is completely clear to me that I must work hard here, probably harder than in Germany, but I still want to laugh at work and have the feeling to be alive. Do you understand what I mean? After a while, Rosie said, I understand you perfectly. I'm not feeling differently in Germany. There, I'm ill, suffering from depression, including migraine. If I'm here or on Mallorca, I'm fine. And believe me, we are not the only ones. Many other Germans are feeling the same, but few have the courage to abandon their tents. And if you really do it, and how I got to know you in those few days, you'll do it, then I salute your courage. The night in the Latin Palace was like the first time. I danced a lot and had hardly time to sit down with Rosie at our table for a drink. Again and again I was asked to dance. I felt almost a little pity for Rosie. Although she was rocking with the music, she seemed to be bored. Finally, I remained with her at the table. Are you bored? No, I like the music a lot, and just to listen is enough for me. But you know what? I've been watching you dancing. You have fire in your blood. You really belong here. I understand now. You could never be happy in Germany. Michael? Forget it. But you don't even know what I want. I'm not coming on any trips with you. Go with Rosie. She's just as crazy as you. Just you wait, I'll get you, I thought to myself, stood up from the breakfast table and walked to the front. There I asked my friend, the older Spaniard at the reception, if he could recommend a favorable car rental. An hour later, my rental car for the next 3 days was parked outside. As a pure coincidence, Michael came around the corner. These coincidences happened often in order to control me. And, whoa, I spoke with a man. Promptly came the question, what does he want from you? Or, do you know him? I said nothing, just rattled playful with the ignition key. What is this? What does it look like? Like a car key, no? I played stupid. Do you have a car? Yes, I have, I replied in an indifferent manner, to start the next moment my tactical attack. I don't know what your plans are for today, but I'll go and have a look around the area, by car, of course. Oh, I come with you. You? Didn't you say you're not going on a trip with me again? With a car it's different. Aha! We also took Rosie along, and the fun began. It was a new challenge for me adapting to the driving style of the Spaniards. It wasn't much better, if not worse, than the French. Later I learned why. 70% of Spaniards drove without a driver's license, and of those 50% had at lunchtime a bottle of red wine after having 2 whiskey for breakfast. This surely didn't make the driving any better. I quickly got accustomed to their driving, even without alcohol. Rosie anxiously looked around, particularly when left and right from us cars were changing lanes, overtaking, and in between 3 scooters. I accelerated and drove into the mountains towards the Arroyo de la Miel, where we had a wonderful view of the valley and the sea, and I shot many nice memories of us. We continued our journey and looked for a restaurant in Benalmádena for lunch. Before I could park, Rosie came in action, and she really was as crazy as me. The places were full. There was hardly any parking. and the idiotic scooter riders parked their things in a way that took 1.5 parking place. Rosie got out and shifted the scooter away so I got room for parking. We repeated this act several times this day, and I had no more parking problem. In Torremolinos, we bought some clothes for us and looked in a CD store for CDs with this pleasant Spanish music. Even Michael found great. Rosie was looking for a shirt for her boyfriend, as Michael discovered a jersey from FC Barcelona, his favorite club. He was getting on my nerves. I necessarily had to buy it for him. I have to do nothing at all, because I had already bought plenty of clothes for him. We sat down at the San Miguel outside the ice cream parlor I knew already, and assured Rosie and Michael here was the best ice cream in the world. Not pity, we ordered huge cups of ice cream with big chunks of chocolate, biscuits, waffles, and chocolate flakes. Michael shoveled off the ice like it was nothing, while Rosie and I already had to fight with half of it. But we bravely fought us through until we came to the glass bottom of the ice cup. Of course, the crowning with our café con leche we would not miss out. Before we made our way back, Rosie disappeared, but shortly returned afterwards with another shopping bag. She presented to Michael with the words, "My gift to you." It was the football jersey. This brought us some bonus points from Michael. In front of the car, she offered to exchange the places with Michael. When I asked why, she explained, "You're already driving as crazy as the Spaniards. All day I'm already dying of fear, and now I feel bad from the ice cream." Michael was delighted, because in Germany it was absolute taboo for him to sit on the passenger seat. But here, each did just how they pleased. Back in Fuengirola, we headed to an area I had not seen yet in the vicinity of the port. It seemed to be quite interesting with its bars and restaurants, surrounded by several hotels. We strolled through the area when my eyes fell on something that initially looked like a bar. Somehow, I was pulled like magic to this cozy little house, standing alone, illuminated with soft light. Even the tables and chairs in front of the door were unlike the normal plastic chairs and offered a special atmosphere. "Let's go there," I suggested. I read the sign, "For sale," and entered. It was love at first sight. Exactly what I had in mind. The walls with yellow and blue basic paint and some lovely line drawings. About 20 PC places all around at the walls. Telephone booths, also in yellow and blue, with windows and doors all made up like a French bistro. Even the tables and chairs in the middle, everything on beautiful floor tiles. Who set up this place did so with heart and soul. At the side of the entrance was a bar. This was exactly what I was looking for. "Rosie, what do you think of the store?" "It's very nice." The man who previously sat outside and greeted us kindly came in and asked if he could help us. "Are you the boss?" He was. A man about my age, but as of this moment an attractive man, because he had something I wanted. "How much are you selling the store for?" 47,000 euros. Jesus Christ. I wondered whether I should make a marriage proposal to the man on the spot, because I couldn't spontaneously think of no one who would lend me the small thing of 40,000 euros. But marriage, I learned quickly, I could forget when he told me half of his life story, including his wife. Rosie and Michael were already getting bored, while I was trying to be friends with the man or to negotiate. He showed me the bar with a server for the computers, but those were already of older date. There was a cooling system for drinks, kitchen, and a storage room. I looked at the toilets. All were clean and tidy. He explained he had a very good customer base, what I believed him without hesitation, if only by the excellent location right inside the hotel complex. But 47,000 euro is too much for me. Best I could afford half, I said resignedly. "I would go down to 40,000. "With a price, but not further," he said kindly. What should I do? This was exactly the store I wanted. But at the time, I couldn't negotiate at all, because this matter was completely new territory for me, and I had no idea of details. Michael asked cheerfully and expectantly at breakfast, "What are we doing today? Where are we going?" Rosie and I thought, however, at the moment absolutely about no tours or trips. We were both feeling totally poorly due to too much ice cream. I tried to make a proposal which would be satisfactory for Michael. "How do you think about going to the beach of Torremolinos? The beach is nicer than here." Michael raged in the sea with his air mattress. Rosie and I were on our beach towels in the shade of palm trees, and cultivated our nausea. Now and then we dragged ourselves into the water to cool down a bit, but only in the afternoon we felt a little better. "For me the subject ice cream is over," I complained, and Rosie nodded. We strolled along the beach promenade, and Rosie agreed with me that it was nicer here, but we had to admit both places and beaches each possessed its own charm. "I invite you today for dinner in the city. We go to the Chinese restaurant we saw yesterday. I was there once before, and the food is very good," I offered. Again I was lucky to have Rosie with me, because someone had dropped his scooter so close to the car I couldn't get out of the parking lot. She just shifted the heavy thing out the way. The next obstacle was the question how to get from the beach up to the city, because there were only one-way streets. 3 times we went in a circle and landed again at the beach. Then I tried one other possibility, and found myself in the pedestrian zone, leading also to the beach. Left and right in front of us pedestrians and sales stalls. Rosie and Michael doubled up laughing. "I need only to hold my arm out the window to take a cargo full of bags and clothes. A shopping tour in a different style," joked Rosie. "Ha ha, very funny. After tens of attempts and dead ends, of which I had to bring the car backwards out again, I finally found the way into town. After we picked the food from the menu, I asked Rosie to order. I would shortly go some place, but be coming back immediately. Raced down the stairs, across the road, jumped into the side street next to the San Miguel, and Raymond immediately jumped up, pleased to see me. He greeted me with a violent embrace. "I must urgently speak with Jones. My decision is made. I'm staying. I'm coming back to stay." Raymond beamed across his face. Obviously, he didn't know what had happened between me and his brother. "Jones is currently not in Spain, but he will get back to you when you're back in Germany." We talked for a moment, but I excused myself that I was not alone. Promised, however, we would see each other more often in the near future. Against my will, I awoke hopes in Raymond I would never respond to. Quickly, I took the opportunity to call Uschi. "Max is doing great. You wouldn't believe what happened here, but I'll tell you when you're back. Then you see it yourself." Now, what could that be? Back at the hotel, we met the Berliners on the flea sofa. "We're going for an evening walk along the beach. Are you coming with us?" "Why not?" We showered, dressed up, and went off. Michael raged around the Berlin woman. He looked at her more like someone his age and didn't see her as a young woman. Still on the way to the beach, on the last crossing, I discovered a newly opened shop with super offers on handbags and clothes. I was so absorbed with the offers, and the others were so absorbed in themselves, I didn't realize they had long since moved on, and they didn't notice I got lost on the way. At the entrance of the shop, I looked to the left and right, but saw no one. Initially I wondered if I should run after them, but how was I to know whether they walked along the beach side or on the promenade side? Moreover, if they didn't notice I was gone, why should I run after them? Michael was with Rosie and the Berliners in a good company. At least they wouldn't leave him out of sight. I knew I could trust them. Slowly I walked in the same direction at the beach, sometimes along the promenade, but I saw them nowhere. Instead, I saw once again many loving couples. The feeling I had repressed for so long was overwhelming me here, and now all much stronger. Finally, I was still a woman with feelings, desires, and sexual needs. Especially here in the heat, the whole atmosphere seemed to strengthen this awareness to me. Of course, a one-night stand would have been possible everywhere, with Raymond or the guys of the Latino disco, even the handsome waiters of the hotel. But in all this, that certain something was missing. It was just not my thing. Lost in my thoughts, I walked on until I arrived in the Port District. There I turned left to go towards the center, but then took a different road I didn't know before. It was quite dark and lonely, but I felt already so much at home here, I had no fear. Straight ahead I could see a road at right angle to the one I was walking on. There, a tall black man walked down the road with long braided hair. Curious, I went a step faster now, and when I reached the street, he had already turned around and came straight in my direction. He too took notice of me now. Our eyes met, and he asked, "Donde vas?" I thought for a moment whether I should answer him at all. This he misunderstood, as if I may not understood Spanish, so he asked the same question again in English. I looked carefully and noticed he was not particularly pretty, but he had an interesting face and a similar figure and size as I do. "I have no particular destiny," I answered, indifferent. Immediately he invited me for a drink at the hairdresser's salon up this road. The salon was except of two white guys full of black men. Chris first introduced me to his friend Jerry and his brother Robert, and then to all the others. The two whites were Austrian and Italian. My undivided attention, however, I paid to Chris. Jerry was a witty guy, and I liked him right away. Robert, his brother, had recently crashed with his bike, as he told me, and I could also see this. He looked rather bad, but he turned out to be an interesting entertainer. However, Chris handed me a beer, and I took it, even though I normally don't drink beer. Until then, everything was very loose and harmless. Chris asked me if I would like to come with him and his friends to Malaga. They planned to go to a disco. The city of Malaga was by then no notion for me. I was now in about the same situation as before, when I met Victor and his friends outside the Chocolate City and spent a fun night in a disco. It was crazy to do the same again. Even worse, I didn't go in my own car this time. I didn't know anything about Malaga. In addition, Michael was waiting in the hotel for me. Nevertheless, I brushed aside any concerns. What should happen to me? Beside the crazy Jamaican Victor, no black man had ever done any harm to me. I trusted them far more than white men. "Okay, I'm coming." When Robert refused, since he obviously was not feeling well, I was actually a little disappointed. Jerry drove. Chris sat on the passenger seat, and I in the back between the Austrian and the Italian guy. Jerry went pretty fast, and I almost died with fright. As always, the miserable passenger. We were passing across a highway, and I saw completely unknown signs to places I had never heard of. My God, where are they taking me? I asked myself secretly. After an endless time for me, Jerry left the highway, and Chris then turned to me. "Do you know Malaga?" I shook my head. Accordingly, we probably were in Malaga now. Jerry parked the car in front of a house we entered and took an elevator to the 9th floor. When Chris opened the apartment door, I was pleasantly surprised about the very pretty and cozy furnishings and the very large apartment. "This is my apartment," explained Chris. The living room was already occupied with a lot of black guys. I had not the slightest idea what country they came from, but here in Spain, this also lost all meaning. Chris offered me to sit on the sofa, handed me another beer, sat down beside me on the arm-lean of the sofa, after he introduced me to his friends here. They were all well-mannered. This I had to give them. I didn't like that they all smoked cannabis. Chris put his arm around my shoulder as if it was natural, and naturally I followed him later in the bedroom. We kissed, made love again and again, and talked a lot with each other. Chris was strongly built, as I do, and possessed considerable stamina. But sex with him was completely emotionless. What fascinated me about him was his intelligence, his way of talking, and that he was obviously a smart businessman. I wasn't in love at this moment, felt not even the wish to see him again. When he asked me for my phone number, I gave him my correct cell phone number, but the wrong house number. I voiced my desire to return to Fuengirola. Jerry was no longer there. The others were all gone to the disco. Chris called a taxi for me, negotiated a price, paid the taxi driver €50. I actually appreciated it. We parted with his promise to call me. Tired, I dropped into my bed at 8:30, where Michael was still peacefully asleep. A long time I didn't sleep though, because at 11 o'clock somebody was pounding on my door. It was not the cleaning lady who bugged the people every day from 8 o'clock on, and they had to ask her every day to come back later. No, it was Rosie storming into the room, half annoyed, half concerned. "Can you tell me where you have been yesterday? Do you have an idea of how much we were all worried about you? All night, actually." Still in bed, I stretched, reached for a cigarette, and explained Rosie how I had lost her and the others, and reported what happened afterwards. Unbelieving, she called out, "You went to Malaga with 4 total strange men? Are you crazy?" Sheepishly, I grinned at her, reassuring, "But nothing is happening to me. I always have my guardian angel with me." She couldn't really be angry with me for long, and I prepared myself to go swimming. I still possessed the tickets for the water park in Mijas. Rosie preferred to go to the beach, so we just took our daily cafe con leche together in the bar next to the hotel, where we could enjoy the wonderful morning sun. Once they will be finished with the construction, it will be a nice terrace at the Vera Mar. "Tell me, why is it actually so quiet in the hotel today?" "Is it bereavement?" Rosie laughed. "No, the English guests have all gone. Now you can see, normally we always complain about the English, but now they're gone and only with the Germans. There it is, as quiet as on a cemetery." We both had to laugh about it. Michael had pure fun in the aqua park, and also no inhibitions to slide down the high winding slides. I took the opportunity to recover myself from the night before. From time to time I swam a few laps, but mainly deepened my tan. Michael was totally black from the sun, but just like me, he didn't sunburn. Simply got darker. The path to and back from Mijas by car was very stressful. This seemed to be one of the hubs of Fuengirola. Roundabouts I wasn't accustomed to at all, but with courage I fought my way through. Hit the acceleration and was in the middle of the roundabout. "Can we move here in the vicinity of the aqua park?" "That would be cool. Then I could come here every day." Michael was frolicking. "My son, this is costing money, but you know there is a sea around which costs nothing, if you go there every day and have the waves included." We were actually punctual on time for dinner for once. Only Rosie was wide in width, not in sight. The Berliners gave me the explanation. Her boyfriend is visiting. Oh yes, I remembered, the one from Morocco. After dinner we took our regular places on the flea sofa to have our coffee, as always. Since Michael was without his friends because they were all gone, he joined us. Later came Rosie down from her room with a beaming smile. I could easily imagine why. In company of her boyfriend. She introduced us to the men. I didn't actually like too much. For my taste he was a bit too scruffy, but who likes it? We all laughed and fooled around. Michael took the black shawl from the Berliner and wrapped himself in it up to his head, so only his eyes were visible. I shot a lot of photos of all of us to memorize this great time, including Michael wrapped in the scarf. Later, I was actually asked who this veiled woman was on the photo. Rosie's boyfriend left us late in the evening, as he had to go back to Marbella, where he worked. Our group moved to the bar, where we entertained waiters, the cook, and the kitchen staff. By 1 o'clock, Rosie announced to withdraw. I go to bed. I'm totally tired. This I can certainly imagine, I said slyly. But I wasn't tired, and had anyhow the feeling the car hadn't been used a lot. After all, I had to return it the next day. In addition, I still had a bill open with Michael. Of Chris, I had namely learned the swells were not to find in Marbella, but shortly outside Marbella, in Puerto Banús. Michael, do you want to come with me for a ride? Rosie and Michael exclaimed at the same time, Now? Why not? I asked innocently. Michael and I raced 1 o'clock at night from Fuengirola to Marbella. Michael wanted to know, what do we do there? See expensive cars, this time truly. But when I just left Marbella behind in direction to Puerto Banús and glanced to the side, I saw that Michael was fast asleep. Puerto Banús was actually the nightlife place for the swells, with open squares, romantically lit bars, discos, and many beautiful people outside on the terraces of cafes. Michael, Michael, wake up! We arrived! Michael, wake up! Came from the side. Slowly the first Ferrari rolled past me. I shook Michael. Michael, wake up! Look at the cars! On the other side I spotted a Porsche. Now I turned the music on loud. For a moment Michael actually opened his eyes, looked right, and asked, half asleep, Mum, what is this policeman doing there on the horse? Eh? I saw on the left the second Ferrari passing me, turned my head also to the right, and had to ask myself the same question. What in the world was this policeman doing on the horse? He dangerously rocked back and forth. His head slumped down, and then the whole man slid from his horse in slow motion. Still half asleep, Michael asked, Why did he fall from the horse now? Because he's drunk. I laughed out loud, trying to imagine this happening in Germany. Just at this moment drew a Lamborghini past me. Resigned, I looked over at Michael, who was already fast asleep again. The next opportunity I had, I turned around and went back to Fuengirola. Good-spirited, I entered the restaurant the morning with my CDs, handed them to my waiter friends with a joke. The CD player in the room doesn't work. Can you play them here? It was one opportunity for shaking up a little those humorless Germans at their breakfast. My cell phone rang. Chris. I had almost forgotten about him. He asked me to come to the hairdresser salon. Rosie and the Berliners took Michael to the beach, and I promised to join them later. When I arrived in Jerry's saloon, Chris wasn't there yet. Jerry and I talked about this and that. I listened attentively as he enlightened me about all the things to be considered if one wanted to start a business here. However, when you come back, you know where you can always come to. My door is always open for friends. Jerry was almost finished with the settlement. The shop officially closed as Chris entered. He somehow awakened the impression he was dominating everything and everybody. He smiled when he saw me and gave me a kiss on the cheek as greeting. Jerry said goodbye and left as Chris pulled me after him to the room behind the saloon, which was completely furnished, like a living room, with TV and all the trimmings. Chris put on a CD with black music, sat down beside me, pulled me into his arms and kissed me. Even his kiss was no way sensitive. He asked me to take off my dress. The man possessed manners, but erotic or romance was zero. He told me he was co-owner of this hair salon and owned a company in Marbella. an import company for clothing and fabrics. Interested, I listened, as he described he was mainly importing fashion fabrics from South America and the Caribbean, which weren't to buy here. Therefore, he had models manufactured according to samples from there. Yes, he was also a trained tailor, would sometimes participate in the work and even do the traveling himself. It all sounded plausible, and I had no doubts of what he said, not even about the fact of telling me his origin was Jamaica. How should I have suspected everything was lie from beginning to end? On our last day, I received a call from the owner of my dream locutorio. He informed me that a German lady had come to see him from a German company, providing support for people wanting to start up business in Spain, with loans and housing up to the search of a school for the children. These people would help. He asked me whether I minded if he passed my phone number to this woman. Of course not. The woman would call me, so the man said. Maybe there was still hope, after all. Like the day before, I left my friends, proceeded to the beach, and promised to meet up later. I wanted to take the time to say goodbye to Jackie. She invited me for lunch when I told her I would probably return this year. She gave me name, address, and telephone number of a lawyer, and told me I should get in touch with Cristobal. He was competent, helpful, and not necessarily expensive. Exceptionally, I wasn't neither talkative nor in a funny mood. By the thought of this being the last day, I just felt like crying. These 2 weeks had passed in a flash, but Michael and I had become much closer again, despite our differences of opinions, than the entire last year in Germany. Michael was no longer a small child and needed his freedom. This he had here in Fuengirola, without me having to worry about him. It was peaceful and safe for him. In Hamburg, it was not the case. It was unthinkable for a child to stay outside until midnight. Here, Michael should live free and happy, and this as soon as possible. Later on this last evening, some hotel guests were more or less voluntarily participating in a Spanish wedding in the adjoining hall to the bar. Never before had I seen so much gaiety, warmth at the ceremony as here, and let myself be carried away for some time. But the thought of Germany, of Hamburg, had an effect on me as if I was led to execution. In fact, a surprise awaited us in Ushi's house, and what a surprise! Max greeted us, also not how I knew Max, and expected it of him. It was a short greeting to rush back immediately to Snoopy's side. Max is in love and about to propose, Ushi explained, laughing. My baby? Yes, your baby is premature and busy learning what he needs to know. Problem is, he's too small for Snoopy. He doesn't fit to jump on her from the back. Only now I realized what she was talking about. Then her husband chimed in. I've tried to put books underneath, so he is bigger. It didn't work though, because they don't remain at one place. But I'm still thinking of a solution. Michael and I looked at each other. This surely couldn't be true. Max was just 1 year old. Ushi described me how these 2 dogs had kept awake the entire family at night with their noise, simply out of frustration, because it didn't work. Snoopy was getting mad because nothing happened and bit him away, and Max howled and chased after her. During the day, however, was peace, and they played, raged, ate, and slept in one basket. Ushi also didn't recognize her bitch anymore. As we were about to leave, Max refused. Instead, crawled under Ushi's corner seat. All calling him didn't help. He didn't want to come with us. Only Snoopy stood before me and looked at me defiantly. You little blonde bitch, I thought. Leave him here, Michael suggested, whereupon I was looking now at Michael, quite surprised. At least 1 more week. Maybe he will be having his successful experience, suggested Ushi's husband. We left him there, this faithless tomato.